What's up everybody, Unrested here, and today I thought I'd do something a little bit different, and I think I probably say that every single time. I think I'll do something a little bit different. I guess every single JFAQ's different. I don't keep doing the same thing over and over again. I'm gonna do something a little personal. How about that? That's different. Usually I don't get very personal at all with myself. It's JFAQ, it's about Japan, right? But I do get a lot of questions about art. Because, as I've mentioned in many videos, I love art, I do a lot of art, I spend a lot of time on art, and probably, and this is just a guess, none of you quite have the concept of how much time I spend on art. Now, I always say I'm busy all the time, busy, I got family life, I got a job, I got all that, I'm an adult, but if I were to be 100% honest with you, I would probably say I spend a good 6 to 8 hours a day drawing, and that's no exaggeration. And I think after we do a little bit on art today, and I'm going to do some about Japanese art, I want to make this still about Japan, not about myself. I'm not a big egomaniac, otherwise this would have been called Scott Fact, okay, or Unrested Fact. It's going to be about Japanese art, some of the styles I've studied, such as Hokusai, I've studied the Hyakumonogatari, I've studied all kinds of traditional line drawings here, pen drawing, the ink wash art, a lot of stuff. I'm going to show you some of that, some of the famous artists, some of the people who I really respect, some of the people you might want to look at yourself, and then we're going to get personal, and I'll show you some of the stuff that I do. Okay? Let's get started. Okay, so the first artist I want to start out with was one I mentioned at the beginning of the intro, and that was Hokusai. Hokusai, full name, Katsushika Hokusai. Dates, let me look these up really quick because I'm not good on dates. He was born 1760 to 1849. Okay, I never remember dates, so you'll have to forgive me. Hokusai is probably one of the most well-known artists, and you probably have already seen some of his art and you don't even know it. One of his most famous ones, translated, is The Great Wave, okay? And that is a gigantic wave crashing over boats while there's a tiny little mountain of Fuji in the background. I'm sure you've seen this one. If not, I'll show it in just a little bit. You'll remember it as soon as you see it. Hokusai was the most influential in bringing over Chinese line art and engravings to Japan. He pretty much brought it over, perfected it, made his own Japanese version, and then came up with some of the best techniques as far as layering. If any of you know anything about things like lithography or wood carvings, you know that layering is involved when it comes to these prints. To explain it in the most simple way possible, it's like using huge stamps, okay, that you would first cut out, which is something that's still practiced today in Japan, cutting out stamps. You would place the first layer, that would be your first layer of colors, and then over top of that you would place the next layer, and so on and so on. Now, if you think about that, it is quite difficult to even predict how these colors are going to mix, how they're going to layer, and how the lines themselves within these engravings are going to layer. This guy mastered it, and he made incredible stuff. I'm going to show you some of his stuff right now. Please enjoy. Okay, like I said, I myself have studied some of his stuff, and when I say study, yeah, looking at pictures is great, reading about him is great, but I feel to really understand an artist, you need to actually practice some of the stuff that they've done and see how damn difficult some of this stuff is, okay? So I practiced with some of the ukiyo-e, and I also practiced with some of the engravings too, and I want to just go ahead and show you right now my sketchbook, okay? And this is my own sketches, okay? This is all my own, I guess I don't know if I want to say original because I did have to look at facsimiles and copies of other artists. I did put my own spin on it as far as color, design, shape, but I mean, I can't really take claim as to saying, you know, I made up a Japanese dragon. Obviously, this is an image such as the Japanese dragon, the koi. There's the dragon heads. I did an entire one of just dragon heads. I can't really take claim to say this is, you know, my own original idea. Obviously not. Okay, there's the Fuyujin and... Okay, this is actually a friend of mine did this one, Jonathan. He's a great artist too. Okay, I saved that because I was really impressed. Here's one I did of a study of the tiger and the dragon. Okay, most of these are watercolor. I feel like watercolor was probably the best representation of kind of the inks and stuff that they had back then. Obviously, some of these are done in the original inks that they use, such as the block inks that you kind of melt down and then use in a brush. But some of the other inks I couldn't really get access to, or I didn't have the money for at the time when I got started, or I just wanted to see how I could do it with watercolor first. One like this one, I started out actually with the inks. This is actually with the inks first. Okay? And that is the samurai fighting the koi. This is kind of a very epic scene that's used in a lot of even tattoos in Japan, and even Yakuza use these sometimes. And usually this is used to show the struggle of the koi swimming upstream, and that is a representation of a man becoming, a boy becoming a man through the struggle of going upstream, the struggle of life. It's a I guess a metaphor. The peacock, okay? That's a very famous thing here in Japan, the image of the peacock. Once again, koi, going upstream, going downstream, going upstream. The fight, the eternal fight from boyhood to manhood. Okay, again, koi. I feel like koi are something you need to study for quite a long time to master just on scales alone. Dragons too. Scales alone can be a study in itself. The snake and the samurai. Okay, there's stories behind that too. Won't go into them in great detail now because it's more about just showing the art. Some of the Japanese obake. I love Japanese obake, and I've studied those. Most of these are fine ink line drawings. This is charcoal. This one right here is the lady and the dragon. I don't know how well you can see these when I hold them up to the camera. I'm hoping it's coming out well. What else do we got? We got an obake there, another obake, more obake. Okay, so as you can see, I studied obake quite a bit. I'm really excited about a lot of the designs, okay? There's the Spider Woman. I'm sure you've heard about her if you've studied any kind of Japanese obake. Let's see, and some of my final ones, I think I have one study in here of, yeah. You can look this up online. You know what, I've actually forgotten the name of this painting, but it's a famous study. I think it's just called the Samurai, or it's just called the Warrior. It's a really simple name. And I tried to perfect that as good as I could. And finally, last but not least, here's a lot of the Hokusai manga. Okay, and that's something you can look up too online, the Hokusai manga. This is a direct copy from some of his line work that he did that actually Van Gogh himself was influenced by. And finally, last but not least, one more dragon. And that one is done completely in the inks. So that was quite difficult to do. So you can see I've studied this stuff quite extensively, very excited about it. Let's move on. Now, I'm sure one thing all of you are a lot more familiar with, at least those of you who are really into the Japanese anime and manga, is the designs of today. Now, I think probably a lot of people have the concept that all manga or all anime kind of look the same. They all have the big eyes, the tiny chins, the tiny mouths, and really, you know, big, perfect, beautiful hair and stuff like that. But there's a lot of artists here in Japan, once you get into the really esoteric, really subgenre stuff, of people who have their really own natural design, and some of these designs that are really organic and follow through with a lot of the ink work from the older time artists, the Edo artists. And one of my favorite, this is my all-time favorite, and he's influenced me quite a bit, is umezu, kazuo umezu, okay? right here is one of his books. This one is Kami no hidarite akuma no migite, which it means kind of like right hand of God, left hand of the devil, kind of, or right hand of the angel, left hand of the demon. Okay, so this is one of his books that he did, and you can tell right away if you take a look inside. Look at this line work. It's incredible. It is so detailed, and every page is so incredibly hyper detailed that this guy is known for being almost psychotic about how much he details things with ink. This is all done in ink. This guy's famous here in Japan. He actually, you want to try and look up his house online. I'm going to put his name right here, okay? And I want you to look up his house online. Now you're probably thinking, well, who cares about a manga drawer's house? Well, wait until you see this guy's crazy house, okay? He did a series of kind of semi-child mangas that were known as gouache. And they were kind of about this mischievous kid. And you'll see the famous, probably if you look up a little bit about him, you'll see the famous little hand sign that he does. I can't remember it specifically now, so I'm not going to try and do it. But gouache is about this kid who kind of dresses almost like Waldo with red and white stripes. And this guy became so obsessed with red and white stripes that he did his entire house this way. So, like I said, here's his name. Look this guy's house up online. Just put in his name, his house. You'll get to check it out. He actually dealt with a lot of trouble in his neighborhood when he built this house. I heard that his neighbors were furious that they had all these normal, conventional looking houses, and then he put up this crazy white and red striped house. He's actually been interviewed on a couple variety shows here, and he is hilarious. Absolutely insane. Great sense of humor. Totally crazy house. It has secret doors and mirrors that move all around. Really interesting guy, and he influenced me quite a bit. He did another series called Juyonsai, and this is about when nature kind of fights back against man. One of his famous characters is Chicken George, and in here, Chicken George is a chicken that they are doing experiments on in a science lab, and the chicken starts to instead of just becoming another one of these like lab rat type animals, he starts to grow a human conscious. He starts to realize what man is doing to animals, and he starts to use the power of nature to kind of fight back against man. So it's kind of like nature's revenge. One of my favorite mangas. Incredible art, and once again you can see insanely detailed. I mean, this must take hours to draw each page. And now, let's take a look at how some of this has influenced me. It's between this guy and another artist who I really like, an American artist named Mark Riddick. It's kind of a style that I've picked up over time that I call blacklining or hyper detail. And I'll show you kind of what I've come up with. This has evolved over decades. I've worked with this kind of style, and it's an ink style mixed with a lot of the Copics you've seen that I've had, the Copic markers. Here's what it looks like. Okay, like I said, lots of influence with this hyper detailed style. Here is just a book cover, and I drew this, honestly. Hand drew this in ink, okay? I think I did do an undersketch first with pencil to just kind of get my bearings. But afterwards, everything was done completely in ink. Backside, I remember I did completely in ink first and silver liner pen. If you take a look inside, the style does not vary at all. I continue to do a highly detailed style. I've made it my own. Everything in here is completely a unique design. I've completely made my own style here. And this is just kind of like a story I actually made up myself. And you can see. Once again, I get really, really into hyper detail. I love artists who do hyper detail, and I myself have tried to master my own version of hyper detail. And like I said, it's a story, it goes on and on. I won't get into detail about it because I think it would actually be kind of boring unless you're really into like fantasy, demon type stuff. Anyway, let's move on, I'll show you a little bit more. Here's another one I did. This is a bigger book, and I actually did this one with color. I did this with Copic color. Copic markers, if you don't know what they are, here's a Copic marker. Looks like this. They are alcohol markers that when they kind of color, the color doesn't really fade as much or get absorbed by the paper, and gives you these bright saturated colors that I really enjoy. It almost gives it kind of a watercolor look. And if you take a look inside, I did more with hyper detail, silver lining, gold lining, and actually I even used a red liner pen in this one too. And this work, I know with this one I actually did direct to pen. Let's see, sorry, this one's so big it's hard to hold up to the camera. This is a zombie piece I drew. Obviously I love zombies, you know that. And once again, the hyper detailing, I'm really into that. Okay, and once again, yes, this is a storybook. I do these a lot. I know you must probably think I'm crazy because there's no person or place or company or anything I do this for. This is my own personal hobby, and like I said, I spend 6 to 8 hours a day drawing and writing this stuff. Why? It makes me happy. That's a good enough reason. This piece is about 3 feet by, well, maybe about 4 feet by 2 feet. And this is entirely black lined. Totally black lined pen. I did do some underdrawings on some parts of this, but mostly it's just direct pen. And once again, some of the silver liner. I love to do this kind of stuff. I don't know if you can see some of the detail in this, but as you can see, a lot of influence from kazuo umezu. Just to give you a quick look at what kind of art stuff I use, I've got tons of Copic markers, which I've shown in a previous video about my house. You can see I've got tons of different types of rulers over here to help me draw perfect circles, because that's actually pretty hard to do. Tons of different sizes of shades and different things as far as pencils and inks and colored pencils and even technical pencils. That's what those are there, those little cases of technical pencil lead. You can see I even have a whole drawer here filled up with, I mean, this is tons of sketches, sketchbooks filled up with all the same kind of stuff you saw before. Over here I have other books that I worked on as far as filling them up with all those same types of sketches that you saw. Even on the wall I've got pieces like a giant map I drew of the fantasy world that I write about. Another giant highly detailed piece like you saw before. And even crazy enough, my desk, the desk that I use to make these videos on, I painted it this way and put my own design on it there. Just because I like all different types of art. I don't try to stick to one type. I try to make sure I give myself a broad base as far as what I can do, and I like to master all different types. So like I said, that's a little bit of my personal life today. I hope you enjoyed that. Those of you who always ask about my family, my life, my house, my art, I hope that solves some of your curiosity. If you have any questions about anything you saw today, as always, feel free to write. I'm Unrested, this is JFAQ. I'll see you next time.